With the recent release of Supermassive 2023, there's no better time to check out the massive verse of comics. But you're probably wondering, what is the massive verse? How do I get into it? And how much do I have to read to understand it? I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about the massive verse. It's morphin' time! Hello, this is Soundout here, and welcome to my guide to the massive verse. This is going to be kind of an introductory guide to what the comics are, who the characters are, and give you an idea if you want to read the comics. It's not going to be so much an issue-to-issue review or breakdown, but it is kind of just like an introductory guide. This is something that I really want to talk about because I love comic books. Obviously, I love comic books. There's like a ton of them behind me. But more specifically, I want to talk about Image's massive verse because I did receive a package from Black Market Narrative, who manage a lot of the Massiveverse stuff, with copies of their new crossover, Supermassive. So, Supermassive is the annual crossover of all the Massiveverse books. This is the regular cover here. There is also this variant cover, cover B. This year's crossover specifically is Radiant Black, Rogue Sun, Dead Lucky, and a little Inferno Girl Red thrown in there as well. This is the retailer incentive cover C. What's really cool about the Supermassive one-shot is that this is essentially the only crossover between the books, because you can read this independent of the books, or you can read them in junction with the books and kind of get a broader understanding of the universe. And I'll try to explain what I mean by that. But if you've ever wondered about the characters of Radiant Black or Rogue Sun or Dead Lucky, and you didn't really know where to start without necessarily jumping into a whole series, I highly recommend Supermassive. Having read through it, of course I have read everything within the Massiveverse so far, so I have that broader understanding, but I could see where you could jump into this sort of like you would jump into maybe a Kamen Rider Versus movie where you don't know all the characters, but you get little hints of their individual stories while enjoying the story of them together. Or say if you started watching the MCU at Avengers Infinity War, more like Captain America Civil War. It's a little lower scale than something that big, but the idea that there are other storylines going on that you may not have seen, but it's to kind of entice you to go look at those if you're interested. And I think this is a great primer for the main heroes. So if you're looking for a good starting point into the Massiveverse, I do recommend Supermassive 2023, because the main characters are, of course, Radiant Black, Dead Lucky, and Rogue Sun, which are the three main titles. And like I said, they did mix in Inferno Girl Red, though I won't mention how they did that. But you're probably wondering, who's Radiant Black? Who's Rogue Sun? Who's Dead Lucky? Who's Inferno Girl Red? You keep throwing out these names and I've never heard of them. Well, the Massiveverse has only been going on for about 2 years, so we should do some primer work here. While I think Supermassive is a great way to start, how about learning about where to start with this universe in case you want to experience it all? So let's go just book by book, break down what I like about each of them, and tell you about what issue we're currently on. Because I think that's the best way to enjoy the Massiveverse, is to look at them individually, because even though they're collectively together, you don't have to read all of them to get the story of any of them. And that is a key thing that is missing in a lot of modern comics. So let's start with Radiant Black. So Radiant Black started in 2021 and kicked off the Massiveverse. Radiant Black is created by writer Kyle Higgins and Marcelo Costa on art, and most of the issues are written and drawn by them. And it has been, I think, sort of the breakout hit that allowed the Massiveverse to become a corner of the universe. So all the books are published by Image Comics. Image Comics is known for the creator-owned books. They're famous for things like Spawn or Invincible and a bunch of other stuff. Those are the other two I mostly read. So Radiant Black sort of has, I think, more of an Invincible vibe than a Spawn vibe, but sort of taking a concept of a superhero that you've seen before and recontextualizing it in a different way to make it interesting. Currently, the series has had 24 issues. It's the longest running. And in the world of comics, 24 issues isn't that bad. So if you want to start reading Radiant Black, you can start at the beginning. Now, there are 4 trade volumes for Radiant Black that cover these 24 issues, so it's a pretty easy pickup. And because they're published through Image, the first volume's only about $10, which is a nice introductory price. Now for me, I have been reading Radiant Black close to the beginning, when the first trade volume dropped, I picked it up. I've been hearing things about the series, but wasn't sure if I wanted it on my weekly polls, because I do have a lot of weekly polls, probably way too many. So the thing was, I was like, I might read Radiant Black in trade paperback. And so I got the first trade, and the ending hooked me so much that I went to my comic shop and found issues 7 through 10, and then caught up, and I've been reading ever since. So it is kind of addictive in that sense, but if you are looking at kind of every 6 months getting a new volume, it's definitely a way to read the series, and it's very concise, and it's really affordable because of the Image Comics pricing. So with Radiant Black, I think you're probably wondering, what's it about? So I'm going to read you the official description and then elaborate kind of on my own thoughts. This is so I don't really go into heavy spoilers, because there's a lot of surprising reveals that'll take place in this series. But the official trade dress description for Radiant Black. Nathan Burnett has just turned 30 and things aren't great. He's working and failing at 2 jobs. His credit card debt is piling up, and his only move is moving back home with his parents. But when Nathan discovers and unlocks the ethereal cosmic radiant, he is given the power to radically change his fortunes. There's just one problem. The powers don't belong to him, and the cosmic beings who created them want them back by any means necessary. So that's a general thing. It does leave out kind of the description of Nathan's best friend Marshall, who is a very important character in the story, and I think he's probably my favorite of the 2 leads, because they are really co-leads of the book, because Marshall works at like a video rental store and talks about movies and physical media and 4K resolution on things and how cinema doesn't work the way it does. And I'm like, yeah, that's me most of the time. So, you know, kind of a connection there. But in general, I think what works about the book is that you have 2 different leading characters who are similar because they are best friends. They do have things in common, but they are very different. And essentially the thing is that without any spoilers, they both end up using the Radiant Black powers throughout the series. And the interesting part about Radiant Black 24, which just hit, is that it ended in a poll, which I think the poll is closed now, but essentially it let the viewers decide who was going to be Radiant Black. And that's something that I haven't seen a poll to decide a comic fate since the death of Jason Todd in 1980 whatever for Batman comics. So it's pretty cool that that idea was brought back, though hopefully with less consequences than that was. But it's really cool because they published this issue in May, and then the official next issue isn't, I think, until June or July. I think it's July. They took off May, or this was published in April. In May, they published Supermassive, and then in July, there is, I think, the next issue. So if you are trying to get into Radiant Black, this is a good jumping on point, issue 24. And if you want to get a feel for the characters of Nathan and Marshall, once again, it's good to check out Supermassive 2023, because they're both in it. Now, a lot of my channel viewers are Tokusatsu fans, and that's where that's kind of this cool overlap. Kyle Higgins has written for Power Rangers as well as Ultraman comics, and that kind of gives him a Tokusatsu edge to a lot of his work in the Massiveverse. Specifically the fact that he's a giant Tokusatsu nerd, so, you know, it kind of fits along the vibe. Radiant Black has powers that are from space that aren't fully explained. He's kind of a host body to powers, similar to Ultraman. However, unlike Ultraman, there are other Radiants. Without spoiling too much of the main Radiant Black series, Radiant Red, Pink, and Yellow have been introduced in the series, sort of forming a Sentai team. They all have different powers and different manifestations of the Radiant, but they have a similar connection to the same power source. But if you want to know about those without jumping into Radiant Black, there is the Radiant Red miniseries, which goes into the backstory for Radiant Red and follows up from her appearance in that series. So while you don't have to read Radiant Black to read Radiant Red, it does sort of help to have that continuing feature. And you can read Radiant Black without ever reading Radiant Red, which I think is a nice distinction. But if you want to know more about Radiant Red, there's a 5-issue miniseries collected in a single trade volume. This follows up from some of the backup stories in Radiant Black that would tell the backstory for Radiant Red, and this expands on it with Cherish Chen as the writer and David LaFuente as the artist. So it's a pretty good miniseries, and I think it's a pretty good pickup. However, the one I might recommend, even if you're not reading Radiant Black, is Radiant Pink. Radiant Pink doesn't work so much as an origin story for her as much as a present-day story and kind of an evolution of the character, which is pretty cool. This series is co-written by Megan Camarena, who people might know from Hyper RPG and just being a social media person in general, and she brought the angle of Radiant Pink being a streamer as part of her life and the mental health struggle that comes with it as part of the story. It is also co-written by Melissa Flores, who some may know from being a brand manager on Power Rangers, as well as the current comic book writer for the Power Rangers comic. I actually had a chance to interview Melissa Flores about Radiant Pink, as well as another book, The Dead Lucky, in the Massiveverse, and you can check out that interview in the link below. Also, Emma Kubert does the artwork on Radiant Pink. It just wrapped up its 5-issue miniseries, so if you are looking for it, I'd say wait for the trade paperback, because that'll be a nice collection. But overall, I found the story of Radiant Pink to be interesting, and maybe as also a social media kind of content creator sort of guy that I am, I can relate to sort of the struggle that she has trying to keep up her content output while also being a superhero. So, pretty cool overall. But let's move out of the Radiant and into the Sun. So Radiant Black had been a success and it was time to expand the Massive universe. And that's essentially where we got the name Massiveverse from the Supermassive 2022 one-shot. My physical copy is in a long box, so didn't dig it out for this video, but Supermassive 2022. This took place after issue 12 of Radiant Black and introduces us to Rogue Sun and Inferno Girl Red. And what's interesting is that both of those are legacy characters within the Massiveverse, so it was kind of our first looks at the characters, but not the people that we would associate with these characters later on. So as of course, spinning out of that was Rogue Sun in 2022, which is probably one of my favorite Massiveverse books. I think right now it's my second favorite overall. Rogue Sun takes the concept of a legacy hero. Essentially, there is multiple Rogue Suns throughout history. Sort of works like Ghost Rider with a twist. And that twist is that if you are Rogue Sun, your soul will be trapped in the Sunstone when you die, and you are therefore there as part of the journey of the next Rogue Sun. It's also kind of similar, I guess, to the symbionts for the Trill in Star Trek, so it's got kind of that angle to it. But currently there's been 12 issues of Rogue Sun. There's 2 trade volumes out. They just had an arc break. They just ended with arc 12, which leads into Supermassive 2023, and then they'll be picking up issue 13 soon. So if you want to get on Rogue Sun, now is the time. This is written by Ryan Parrott, who has done work on Power Rangers, and the art is done by Abel for most issues. I've really enjoyed this. Here is the official trade description for Rogue Sun. Yesterday, New Orleans' greatest hero, Rogue Sun, was murdered. Today, rebellious teenager Dylan Siegel discovers that Rogue Sun was his estranged father Marcus, and that he's inherited his father's mantle. Tasked with protecting our world from the forces of the supernatural and solving his father's murder, Dylan will be forced to come to terms with the man he spent the majority of his life hating. So there's a lot of drama, and honestly, Dylan's not even a likable protagonist. He's kind of a little jerk. But the thing I find that's interesting is that you start to learn the legacy of the other Rogue Suns, as well as the forces that are kept at bay from Rogue Sun, and that is pretty cool. It's kind of got a nice supernatural superhero mix, which is right up my alley. Also adding to that, just in general with the way that the Radiants work, they're transforming sort of Henshin heroes. They touch the Radiant, they turn into their form. He touches the Sunstone, becomes Rogue Sun. So if you are into transforming superheroes, it's mostly transforming superheroes in the Massiveverse. I think pretty much all of them are, so it is definitely that vibe. Artwork is fantastic in this series, and I highly recommend checking out Rogue Sun. Once again, you can read it completely standalone, but the 2 massive, Supermassive one-shots, one taking place before this and one taking place after issue 12 of this, are a good place to kind of continue more of the character's legacy. Now, the next hero is a bit more unconventional. The Dead Lucky. The Dead Lucky is probably, I think, the most interesting of the Massiveverse books because it does pull from sort of Tokusatsu sort of tropes, superhero tropes, but it adds a new special layer to it. This is run 6 issues currently. Issue 7 will be starting up, I believe, in July. So if you want to check it out, check out this nice, thick $10 trade paperback. My comic shop sadly didn't get issues 3 through 6 of Dead Lucky. They got shorted by Diamond, I think. So I did pick up the trade, and so I've read this recently. But this is written by Melissa Flores, and the art is by French Carlo Magno. And it's really cool. There's a very deep personal connection to the creation of Dead Lucky that Melissa talks about in the interview that I referred to you earlier, which you should definitely check out. Let me read the official trade description for the Dead Lucky. San Francisco is changing. Tech consortium Moro is building a city of the future with quote-unquote peacekeeper robots. Looming on every corner, and wherever Moro isn't, the Salvation Gang is. Viviana Lopez Yang is changing too. She came back from Afghanistan with PTSD and the ability to control electrical currents. If she can hold it together, she might be the hero San Francisco needs. But against an enemy this big, it isn't enough to be good. She'll have to be lucky. So Bibi is a great character. Love her story. It's very true to the experience that soldiers have post-conflict, post-war. Without too much spoiler, the sort of connection that she has in this, and the reason why she's called the Dead Lucky, is that she is part of a military platoon, and she is the survivor, but they were called the Dead Lucky. And so she can control electrical currents. The twist is that she controls electrical currents using the energy of people. And so the energy of her comrades stay with her, which is it's a heart-wrenching kind of thing, is that she has her platoon with her still. And what's really interesting about this is because she can control electrical currents, she has a giant robot, and her giant robot is essentially piloted by her comrades. And so I really love that. And I also love the commentary on gentrification in large cities as cultures start to get wiped out, and her mixed Asian and Mexican descent also allows for a lot of great cultural opportunities of mixed race people who have families that don't, that society says don't normally go together. And so I think that's a really great level to it. So there's a lot of great messages as well, in addition to being really good superhero storytelling. So Dead Lucky is going to be your unconventional pick. And if you're not sure if you're going to like the character of Bibi, once again, Supermassive 2023, she has a great part in this. I think she's actually kind of the breakout star of this crossover. So yeah, I definitely recommend the Dead Lucky. So now let's break publishing trends with Radiant Black. It's an ongoing series that releases most months unless they, need an extra month to work on something. Rogue Sun, Dead Lucky, same thing. Dead Lucky took a little bit of a break, but it does have, it's an ongoing story. Let's talk about something that's a little different, because we have Inferno Girl Red. Now, Inferno Girl Red debuted on Kickstarter, pretty successful from what I understand, and they did publish it in trade form for retail. So there are two ways to get Inferno Girl Red. You can get it in the 3 prestige format comics, which is what we're looking at here. This is just kind of like your general comic shop issues, except these are each, I think they're about $6 a piece. If I remember, yeah, they're $6 a piece, 3 of them. It covers book 1 of Inferno Girl Red. This will also be collected in a trade volume that is essentially this. I'm not sure if I'm ever going to get the trade volume because these are pretty thick and kind of stick them on the shelf, similar to the Supermassive issues. But with these, you get, they're longer format issues, but this covers essentially, I'd say, about the same as about 6 issues of the other Massiveverse stories. Now, what makes Inferno Girl Red different? First of all, Inferno Girl Red is written by Matt Groom, who you might know from the Marvel Ultraman comics. He co-writes those with Kyle Higgins, and the artwork is by Erica DeRusso. I'm going to read you the description for Inferno Girl Red, and then I'll tell you the Tokusatsu connection to the character. So, a new school, new relationships, new possibilities for any teenager. Big moves are both challenging and exciting. But it's a whole other thing for Cassia Costa. Because of an ancient cult and their army of demons has ripped her new home of Apex City out of our universe and cast it into darkness, to have any hope of saving it, Cassia must survive the worst night of her life, embrace a secret legacy, and find the courage to fight when all seems lost as the blazing light of hope in the dark. Inferno Girl Red. So what's really cool about Inferno Girl Red is, while we have sort of an Ultraman Sentai vibe with Radiant Black, we have, I would say, kind of more like a Garo vibe off of Rogue Sun, and Dead Lucky brings a bit of Sentai vibe with the robot angle. Inferno Girl Red is all Kamen Rider inspired, and I can just say that outright. First of all, can't really tell from the front page, but she wears a red scarf, a very iconic thing to Kamen Rider. She has special powers and an actual transformation item. With Radiant Black, it's a Radiant. With Dead Lucky, electrical currents, Sunstone for Rogue Sun. The Inferno Girl bracelet is straight up like a Kamen Rider transformation item. The other thing that's really cool about Inferno Girl Red, not just from, there's the design, once again, very Kamen Rider in a lot of ways. The other cool part is the way that it takes the overall concept of things that you would see in Kamen Rider and applies it to the artwork. And I think the artwork is just incredible. This is probably my favorite illustrated book of the entire thing. What's also cool is there is a legacy to Inferno Girl Red. The bracelet essentially chooses a new person each time it passes on. And so Cassia's mother knew the previous Inferno Girl Red, and now Cassia's Inferno Girl Red. But Kamen Rider fans, tell me if this this sounds familiar to you, where you have a page with some text, you got, you know, scarf, helmet, and it says, "The burning light of hope in the dark, Inferno Girl Red." That sounds like a Kamen Rider transformation jingle. And without too many spoilers, she also has form changes. So I think that more than anything, this is kind of a sort of similar vibe to Kamen Rider while giving something unique for the overall superhero comic landscape. So yeah, Inferno Girl Red is great. I would recommend just picking up the trade volume at this point, since that should be out very soon if it's not out already. But yeah, Inferno Girl Red, definitely cool, especially if you like Kamen Rider and cyberpunky futuristic cities. So now that brings us to the last and most recent Massive Verse book. Maybe I shouldn't say last, there's probably like more coming. But the most recent Massive Verse book hasn't appeared in any other material. So, you know, Radiant, Rogue Sun, Dead Lucky, Inferno Girl Red. They all stick standalone. You can read all of them separately, no problem. But the Supermassive crossovers, both the 2022 and the 2023, will tie into those. So there is some sort of cohesion. But what currently is completely standalone is No One. I've already covered No One on the channel. I did a YouTube short about issue 1, since the good folks at Black Market Narrative sent me all the variant covers for issue 1. But No One is a different vibe. So while I can say that the others are superheroes that take the best of you know, Western comics, mix it with a lot of great elements of Tokusatsu, from writers who are experienced in writing Tokusatsu-inspired comics, No One, which is, you know, it's still written by Kyle Higgins, but it is co-written by Brian Buccellato with art by Geraldo Borges. This is different. This is a murder mystery. This is a bit of a darker story. I think the other books sort of hit like that late teen demographic. You're gonna get a little bit, not too much violence, a little bit extra language than your standard like Marvel DC book. No One is definitely more like the mature title. In fact, it's rated mature, whereas the others are rated teen plus. I'd say Inferno Girl Red's probably like the least adult of them, since Cassia is a teenager. But with No One, it is definitely a mature book. It is about a murder mystery. It gets pretty grisly. But the thing is about No One that I find to be really fascinating is that is a 10-issue miniseries that is this murder mystery and this mysterious figure known as No One. He has kind of a armored cyborgy look to him, so I would say it's less Toku inspired than some of the others, but since we've never seen who No One is, there is no exact way to know how they would transform, if they even do. So it's kind of interesting. I'm not sure if this is going to cross over with the others. The other thing to add to this is there is a companion podcast. Every issue has a companion podcast that is in universe with the characters, and it's fully voice acted, and it's really cool to hear the characters come to life in that way. So No One, I'd say, you know, just like I said in the short, it's a really good, interesting murder mystery. We're on issue 3 right now. I look forward to reading more of it. I find it really fun to read month to month as I try to uncover everything, but I'm sure when the entire thing is out and you listen to all 10 podcast episodes while reading all 10 issues, it will also be good. But let's read the official description just so it summarizes a little bit better than what I just did. 10 months ago, the Richard Moreau murders shocked the city of Pittsburgh. In the months since, the killings have sparked a dangerous political movement, copycat killers, and a masked vigilante who's determined to hold the powerful accountable. Not a symbol, not a hero, they could be anyone, they're no one. I especially like the tagline of the character being, "No one is above the law and I am no one." Really cool stuff. Nice gothic noir vibe as well. So circling back to Supermassive 2023, which is the most recent release in the universe, what's really cool about this, as opposed to other crossovers in comics, this was written by all the writers of the other books. So Kyle Higgins and Ryan Parrott, Melissa Flores, and I think Matt Groom as well. It's a lot of people writing this book, including there's some other people too. And then on art, you have Danielle Di Nicolo, who people might know from Power Rangers Shattered Grid. So it's kind of a neat little Shattered Grid reunion. But it gives the characters a really nice, vibrant feel to them. So overall, I think if you're trying to get in the Massiveverse, this is the perfect starting point as of right now. And if you want to get any of the titles, you don't necessarily have to read them from the start. You could just jump in. I think it's going to be Radiant Black 25, Rogue Sun 13, Dead Lucky 7, Inferno Girl Red Book 2, would be your starting points. No One being a 10-issue miniseries, I highly recommend just starting that from the beginning. Honestly, you can start all of them from the beginning because they haven't been running too long yet. I'm really excited to see what they're going to do next. I'm always kind of like on the edge of like, what's this going to be? Because they kind of come up with some really cool ideas that you don't see in other comics. Like there's an issue of Rogue Sun that is a choose your own adventure book. Like that's the kind of crazy thing that you'll get from the Massive Verse that you may not get from Marvel or DC or even other Image books. There's a cohesion to it by keeping the books separate with having the annual crossover. I think that works out pretty good because then it doesn't make it feel like if you're only reading Dead Lucky, you're not missing something in Rogue Sun. And then when you read the crossover, you're like, maybe I should go read Rogue Sun because he seems pretty cool. That kind of idea. So when it comes down to it, I'd say with the Massive Verse, it's probably one of the easiest things to get into with Western comics right now in the superhero space, simply because it hasn't been going on too long currently, and everything works sort of standalone. So hopefully this video is kind of a good guide for that. So I went over a lot of comics. Hope it wasn't too overwhelming. If it was, leave me a comment and ask me a question. Also, if you're looking for any of these books, I'd highly recommend just checking your local comic shop, and I know that not everybody has one, so if you don't have one, you can probably find the trade paperbacks at places like Barnes & Noble or Books A Million or Amazon, or online comic shops such as Things From Another World. None of those are sponsorships, I'm just throwing the names out. But if you are trying to find a hub to find these comics and look for them, check out the Black Market Narrative website. There's also other comics that are unrelated to the Massive Verse included on that site, but they have links to where you can buy Radiant Books, Rogue Sun, Inferno Girl, Dead Lucky, and they also have a shop that sells special variants of the comics. So I'll link that below as well. Once again, thank you to Black Market Narrative for sending out Supermassive. It gave me a great starting point to make this video. I've been kind of wanting to talk about these comics in some way, and trying to integrate them into the channel has been tricky, and I think this was a great way because now I can say this is your starting point. Supermassive 2023, absolutely great starting point. So on that, just highly recommended. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. Leave a comment down below if you want to see me do more videos on comics. I will likely cover more Massive Verse stuff on the channel because it seems to keep rolling ahead and I'm still excited about it. Also be sure to hit subscribe and notification bell so you don't miss out on those videos, because sometimes they may pop up as shorts instead of full videos and you don't want to miss out on those either. You can find me here on YouTube live Mondays at 5 p.m. Eastern if you want to ask me a question directly. And you can also check out my social media at Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, as long as those are still applicable, at Soundout12. So by all means, hit me up. I have been reading all of these, so I keep up with pretty much everything that's going on. Also be sure to check out HeroClub at hero-club.com for comic reviews and more, and my awesome graphic designer on Twitter at darkclaw643. And until next time, this is Soundout saying goodbye.